A single mother living in a rough neighborhood and struggling with multiple jobs and mounting debts stumbles upon a lost boy. Rather than leaving him alone at the police station, she decides to take him home. Unbeknownst to her, the boy's father is a powerful CEO, and his gratitude transforms her life in ways she never imagined. Before we dive into this, let us know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. Shanice walked across the cracked asphalt, the light weight of her grocery bag, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, barely enough to last until Friday. Her worn purse tugged against her shoulder, reminding her of the mounting bills and overdue rent. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, save for the wind rustling through the trees, but today something felt different, heavy in the air, making each step seem more significant. She was exhausted, juggling late shifts at the convenience store, cleaning jobs and a car on its last legs. Yet she kept her focus ahead, surviving one day at a time. But then she saw him. A small figure, hunched on the curb near the entrance to the store, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. A little boy no more than 6, with light skin and brown curls, wrapped in a navy blue jacket that seemed too crisp and new for this rundown neighborhood. This wasn't her concern. She had enough on her plate. Rent was overdue, the car was on its last legs, and her daughter was counting on her. But something about the boy's trembling figure gnawed at her, pulling at the small thread of humanity she still clung to in the midst of all her struggles. She paused for a moment, her feet frozen in place, before a thought of Kira flashed in her mind. If it were her daughter sitting there, eyes swollen with fear, would she want a stranger to just walk by? This wasn't her concern. Rent was overdue, bills were piling up, and her car was on its last legs. She had her own battles. But then she thought of Kira. If it were her daughter sitting there, eyes swollen with fear, would she want a stranger to just walk by? She crouched a few feet away, keeping her voice gentle. "Hey sweetheart, you okay?" The boy flinched, curling into himself, his wide eyes filled with wary confusion. Shanice recognized that look, the cautious assessment she'd faced on construction sites where men judged her before she spoke, or in stores where security shadowed her too closely. Now it stared back from a white child's face at a black woman. She maintained her distance, hands visible, tone soft. "I won't hurt you, I promise. You look like you could use some help." He sniffled, lower lip quivering. "I can't find my daddy." Shanice nodded, choosing her words with care. "Okay, we'll figure it out." She pointed to a nearby bench. "Want to sit for a minute?" He hesitated, then nodded, wiping his eyes with his sleeve before following her. Shanice sat at the far end, giving him space as he composed himself. "What's your name?" "Christopher," he whispered. "All right, Christopher. Do you know your daddy's phone number?" He nodded eagerly, rummaging in his small backpack to pull out a crumpled paper. Shanice took it gently, smoothing it to reveal a neatly written number and an address below. She dialed on her phone. "Not far from here." It rang once, twice. Voicemail. She frowned, tried again. Still nothing. Beside her, Christopher twisted his hands, his breath shallow. Shanice glanced between him and the paper. She should call the police, let them handle it. But the image of this boy alone in a station, terrified and waiting, twisted her gut. The address was only 10 minutes away. "Okay," she said, standing. "I'm going to take you home, all right? We'll find your daddy together." Christopher's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Shanice knelt to his level. "I get it. You don't have to come with me. We can wait for the police if that feels safer, or you can buckle up in my car before I even start it. Your choice." He bit his lip, thinking. After a long pause he whispered, "Okay." As they walked to her car, Shanice made sure he climbed in and fastened his seatbelt first. In the rearview mirror she saw him clutching the paper like a lifeline. It reminded her of Kira's hopeful eyes that morning, dreaming of a big house with a yard and a dog, dreams Shanice couldn't afford amid the flickering lights and mounting bills of their cramped apartment. But if it were Kira lost like this, she'd want someone to step up. "You're nice," Christopher said quietly, gazing out the window. Shanice let out a hollow laugh. "You don't even know me, kid." He shrugged. "You didn't leave me." Those words squeezed her heart, not just because he was lost, but because of the trust in his voice, as if she could fix it all. How could she, when she could barely scrape together rent? The drive was silent, except for the engine's weary hum and Christopher's occasional sniffles. Shanice gripped the wheel, her mind spinning through what might await. Maybe his father was out searching, frantic. Or maybe it was something worse. She hated the unknown. Is my daddy going to be mad? Christopher asked, voice small. She glanced back in the mirror. I don't think so. He's probably just worried. I didn't mean to get lost, he murmured. I know. It happens. The address led to a neighborhood worlds apart from hers. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, grand houses with gleaming cars and driveways. Her rusty sedan stood out like a blemish. As they pulled up, Shanice exhaled, steeling herself. This simple act of kindness was pulling her into unfamiliar territory, but she couldn't turn back now. For Christopher, for Kira, for the part of her that refused to walk away when someone needed help, she slowed in front of a two-story house with white shutters and a stone pathway leading to the front door. Before she could even shift into park, the front door flew open. A white man burst out onto the porch, his dress shirt untucked, his sandy brown hair disheveled, his face pale with panic. Christopher, he shouted. Christopher gasped, his tiny fingers fumbling with the seatbelt as he scrambled to unbuckle himself. Shanice barely had time to put the car in park before the boy flung the door open and ran toward his father. The man fell to his knees, arms wide, catching Christopher in a tight embrace. Oh my God, buddy, he choked, his voice shaking. I was so scared. Christopher clung to him, his small frame trembling. I couldn't find you, Daddy. The man pulled back just enough to cup his son's face, pressing frantic kisses to his forehead. I'm here. I'm here. He turned his head then, his gaze locking onto Shanice, and for a second, something flashed across his face. Relief, confusion, then something harder, something wary, the look she'd seen too many times before. A white man in an expensive neighborhood, looking at a black woman in a beat-up car, trying to calculate if she was help or threat. He stood slowly, keeping one arm wrapped around Christopher as he took a hesitant step forward. Shanice recognized the look immediately. It was the same look she got when she walked into certain stores, the same look some people gave her when she knocked on doors for cleaning jobs. That moment of hesitation, of calculation, like they weren't sure whether she was help or a problem. Her chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. She wasn't about to let this man make her feel like she had done something wrong. I found him outside a grocery store, she said, her voice even. He was crying. He had this. She pulled the crumpled piece of paper from her pocket and held it out. Tried calling. No answer. The man hesitated before reaching for it, his fingers brushing against hers as he took it. He glanced down, then back up at her. His jaw tightened. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his free hand over his forehead. I didn't even realize he was gone until I got home. I must have lost him in the parking lot while I was putting the bags in the car. I thought he was right behind me. His voice wavered, and for the first time, Shanice saw past the guarded expression. He was shaken, guilt settling into the lines of his face. It happens, Shanice said, though she wasn't sure why she felt the need to reassure him. Maybe because she knew what it was like to feel like you'd failed your kid. He swallowed hard, glancing down at Christopher, then back at her. Thank you, he said. The words slower this time, more careful. Really? I don't know what I would have done if. He shook his head, stopping himself. Shanice nodded once. No problem. She turned slightly, ready to head back to her car, but Christopher's small voice stopped her. Miss Shanice. She looked back at him. The little boy hesitated, then took a step toward her, his tiny fingers fiddling with the hem of his coat. Thank you for not leaving me. Something in her chest twisted. Shanice crouched down, leveling her gaze with his. You're welcome, kid. Christopher bit his lip, then suddenly reached forward, wrapping his arms around her neck in a quick but fierce hug. It caught her off guard, but before she could react, he pulled away and ran back to his father's side. The man, Christopher's father, watched them, something unreadable in his expression now. Then he shifted, standing up straighter. What's your name? Shanice Williams. He nodded slowly, like he was committing it to memory. I'm Jonathan Pierce. He hesitated, then added. If there's anything I can do to repay you, may I ask what you do for work, Miss Williams? The question caught her off guard. Why does that matter? It doesn't, he said quickly. You handled this situation with a lot of competence. The way you calmed Christopher down, the way you assessed the situation and made decisions. That takes a particular kind of problem-solving ability. Shanice's jaw tightened. I clean offices, stock shelves, whatever pays. Jonathan's expression shifted, something like recognition flickering in his eyes. Is that what you want to do? Does it matter what I want? The words came out sharper than she intended. It might. He pulled out his wallet, extracting a business card. I own a construction company, Pierce Developments. We're always looking for people with good judgment and work ethic. Shanice stared at the card, her heart pounding. Construction, the industry that had chewed her up and spit her out. You don't know anything about me. I know you could have walked past my son. I know you made sure he was safe, even though it cost you time, and probably money you don't have. I know you gave him choices instead of just taking over. He paused. And something tells me there's more to your story than stocking shelves. Shanice's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him about her training, about the dreams she'd buried, about the men who'd made her feel like she was nothing. But the words wouldn't come. Think about it, Jonathan said, pressing the card into her hand. If you're interested, call me, even if it's just to talk. Shanice turned without another word, walking back to her car. As she climbed in, she could still feel Jonathan's eyes on her, watching as she pulled away. By the time Shanice pulled into her usual parking spot outside her apartment, the afternoon shadows were growing longer. It was just after 3 o'clock when she finally made it home. She sat there for a moment, staring at the business card on her dashboard. Pierce Developments. She'd heard of them. They were one of the bigger contractors in the city, known for commercial and residential projects, the kind of company that wouldn't have given her the time of day 6 years ago when she was fresh out of tech school with stars in her eyes. 3 years at Henderson's Medical Supplies had given her a paycheck, but it had never given her purpose, not the way construction work once had. Years ago, fresh out of a technical college program in construction management, Shanice had dreamed of building things that mattered. She'd completed an internship at a small construction firm, learned to read blueprints, understand load-bearing calculations, coordinate material deliveries. But the industry had chewed her up and spit her out before she'd even gotten started. Women don't belong on construction sites, one foreman had told her, loud enough for the whole crew to hear. You should be answering phones, not pretending you can do a man's job. When a senior project manager had blamed her for his own miscalculations on a warehouse project, claiming she'd corrupted the spreadsheets, the company had let her go without investigating. No references, no second chance, just the door and a reputation she couldn't shake in the tight-knit construction community. So she'd taken the administrative job at Henderson's. Safe, stable, soul-crushing. And when that company downsized 3 months ago, she'd been back to square one with nothing but cleaning jobs and late-night shifts at convenience stores to keep her and Kira afloat. Now she scraped by doing whatever work she could find, stocking shelves at convenience stores, cleaning offices after midnight, doing laundry for people who barely acknowledged her presence. The money was never enough, the bills stacked up faster than she could pay them, and the landlord's friendly reminders were getting less friendly by the day. 2 months behind on rent, one more missed payment, and she and her daughter Kira would be out on the street. She grabbed the grocery bag and headed inside, trying to push the card out of her mind. She had Kira to pick up in an hour, rent to figure out, a car that was one bad start away from dying completely. She was sorting through bills at the kitchen table when her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Williams, this is Jonathan Pierce. I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Shanice's grip tightened on the phone. How did you get my number? It was on the paper Christopher had. I apologize if that's intrusive. He paused. I wanted to follow up on our conversation. I did some research after you left. Her stomach dropped. What kind of research? The kind that tells me you completed a construction management program at Portland Technical College 6 years ago with honors. The kind that tells me you did an internship at Hartley Construction and showed real promise. And the kind that tells me you left the industry abruptly with no clear reason why. Shanice's blood ran cold. You had no right. You're absolutely correct, he interrupted. And I apologize. But Miss Williams, I've been in this industry for 20 years. I know what happens to women who try to break in. I know about the harassment, the sabotage, The way one false accusation can end a career before it starts. She was silent, her heart pounding. I'm not offering you charity, Jonathan continued. I'm offering you a second chance at something you were good at, something you might have loved if the industry hadn't failed you. Why? The word came out harsh. Why would you do this for a complete stranger? Because 6 years ago, my company was smaller. We had a female project coordinator named Rachel Torres, brilliant woman. The crew made her life hell until she quit. I didn't stop it. I told myself it was just how the industry worked, that she needed to toughen up. His voice grew quieter. She left construction entirely. Last I heard, she was managing a retail store, completely wasting her talent. I've regretted not fighting for her ever since. Shanice closed her eyes. And you think giving me a job makes up for that? No, but it's a start. And Miss Williams, I've changed how I run my company since then. I have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and harassment. I have a female foreman, Rita Sanchez, who's tougher than anyone I've ever met and doesn't take shit from anyone. If you come work for me, you'll be walking into a different environment than the one you left. I don't have references, Shanice said quietly. Hartley made sure of that. I don't need references from people who didn't deserve your talent in the first place. What I need is someone who can read blueprints, coordinate schedules, solve problems under pressure, and isn't afraid of hard work. From what I saw today, you can do at least 3 of those things. The rest we can teach you. Shanice looked around her tiny apartment, at the bills spread across the table, at the cracked ceiling and flickering light. I have a daughter. I can't afford to take risks. Then don't think of it as a risk. Think of it as a job. Starting wage is $22 an hour, more once you prove yourself. Health benefits after 90 days. You start as general labor, but if you show aptitude, and I think you will, there's a clear path to supervisor positions and eventually project management. $22 an hour, that was more than double what she was making now. That was rent paid on time, groceries without counting every penny, maybe even fixing the car. When would I start? She asked, barely believing the words coming out of her mouth. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., I'll text you the address. He paused. Miss Williams, I can't promise it'll be easy, but I can promise it'll be fair. And I can promise that if anyone gives you trouble because of your gender or your race, they'll answer to me. After she hung up, Shanice sat in silence for a long time, staring at the business card. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe she was setting herself up for another heartbreak. But maybe, just maybe, this was the door she'd been waiting for. She didn't call Jonathan back that night. She didn't need to. He'd already made the decision for her, in a way, by believing she could do this before she believed it herself. Instead, she spent the evening, after putting Kira to bed, digging through her closet until she found the old binder from her construction management courses. The plastic cover was cracked, the pages yellowed, but the information inside was still good. Load calculations, material specifications, safety protocols, OSHA regulations. She stayed up until 2 in the morning, refreshing her memory, her heart pounding with equal parts terror and excitement. The next morning, Wednesday, October 5th, before the sun had fully risen, Shanice pulled into the construction site, her car groaning in protest as she parked near the rows of heavy machinery. The place was already alive with movement, workers in hard hats shouting over the hum of equipment, the metallic clang of steel beams being hoisted into place, the rhythmic pounding of hammers echoing through the air. For the first time in 6 years, Shanice felt something she'd almost forgotten: belonging. She stepped out, adjusting her jacket against the crisp morning air, scanning the site, until she spotted a woman with short-cropped gray hair and sharp eyes barking orders near the supply shed. Rita Sanchez, it had to be. Shanice made her way over, stopping just short of the woman's personal space. Rita Sanchez. The foreman turned, her sharp eyes raking over Shanice with an assessing gaze that held no hostility, just professional evaluation. You Williams? Shanice nodded. Rita grunted. Jonathan says you used to work construction. That true? 6 years ago. I'm rusty. Rusty I can work with. Lazy I can't. Rita gestured toward a stack of lumber. You remember how to read a cut list? Shanice felt something unlock in her chest. Yeah, I remember. Good. Because we're behind schedule, and I need someone who can think, not just lift. You prove you can do both. We'll get along fine. The first day was brutal, but in a different way than she'd expected. Her muscles ached, that part was familiar, but no one catcalled her. No one made jokes about her being a woman. When she asked questions, people answered them straight. When she spotted an error in a framing measurement and pointed it out, the crew lead thanked her instead of getting defensive. By noon, her shirt was drenched with sweat despite the cool breeze, her gloves caked in dust and grit. Rita walked over and handed her a bottle of water. "You remember more than you think you do," the foreman said. "Saw you checking those measurements." Good eye. It wasn't approval, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, and for Shanice that was enough. The days blended together. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, then into the following week. Shanice showed up before dawn every morning, stayed until the light faded. She learned the names of the crew, the rhythm of the work, the unspoken rules of the site. By the end of the first 2 weeks, mid-October now, the skepticism from some of the other workers began to fade. She was always the first to arrive, the last to leave. She took on the worst jobs without complaint, asked questions when she didn't know something, and learned fast. Slowly, respect replaced doubt. Then came a Friday afternoon in late October, the 27th to be exact. The crew was wrapping up when Jonathan himself showed up at the site. He wasn't in a suit this time, just a button-down, with the sleeves rolled up, but he still carried that same air of quiet authority. He scanned the site before his gaze landed on Shanice. "Walk with me," he said, already turning toward the edge of the lot. Shanice hesitated only for a second before following. Jonathan stopped near a stack of steel beams, looking out over the framework of the building taking shape. "You're doing good work," he said after a moment. Shanice shrugged. "Just doing the job." Jonathan nodded, like he appreciated the lack of false modesty. "That's why I want to offer you something more." Shanice frowned. "More?" Jonathan turned to face her fully. "There's a management training program for employees who show leadership potential. I think you'd be a good fit. It's a 6-month program. If you complete it successfully, there's a path to project management." The words hit harder than Shanice expected. She had been so focused on just surviving, on keeping her head above water, that she hadn't even considered what came next. A job was one thing. A career, a real chance to build something for herself, for Kira, that was something else entirely. She let out a slow breath. "Why me? I've only been here 3 weeks. Jonathan's lips curved slightly. "Because I see potential, and because people like us, we don't get handed a lot of doors. Sometimes when one opens, you got to be willing to step through it." Shanice looked away, jaw tightening. She had spent years pushing against doors that refused to budge, swallowing disappointment, forcing herself to believe that grinding through each day was the best she could hope for. But standing here, hearing those words, "Sometimes when one opens, you got to be willing to step through it," she felt something shift inside her. She turned back to Jonathan, her decision already made. "All right, I'm in." Jonathan nodded, satisfied. "Good." Monday morning, October 30th. Report to the main office. "We'll get started." But life, Shanice was about to learn, had a way of testing resolve just when things started looking up. That evening, as she drove home, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. It was 6:15 in the evening. "Miss Williams," a woman's voice, professional but strained. "This is Linda from Riverside Elementary. I'm calling about Kira." Shanice's heart lurched. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's fine physically," the woman said quickly. "But there was an incident today. Another student accused her of stealing from a backpack. The other child's mother is quite upset, and is threatening to involve the police, unless this is resolved." Shanice's grip tightened on the wheel. "Kira wouldn't steal anything. I believe you, Miss Williams, but the other mother is very insistent. She's demanding that we search Kira's belongings and your home. She's made some accusations about your financial situation." The implication hung in the air like poison. Shanice pulled over, her hands shaking with rage and fear. "When do I need to be there?" "As soon as possible. The other mother is here now with her husband. They're quite influential in the school district, and I'm afraid this could escalate if we don't handle it carefully." 40 minutes later, at 7 o'clock, Shanice walked into the principal's office to find Kira sitting in a chair, her eyes red from crying. Across from her sat a well-dressed white woman with blonde hair, her arms crossed, her expression cold. Beside her stood a white man in a business suit, his jaw tight with barely contained anger. "Miss Williams," Principal Thompson said, standing. "Thank you for coming so quickly. The woman in expensive clothes stood abruptly. Is this her, the mother? Shanice kept her voice level. I'm Shanice Williams. What's this about? The woman's lip curled. Your daughter stole $75 from my son's backpack. That's what this is about. Kira didn't steal anything, Shanice said firmly. Oh really? The woman pulled out her phone, showing a photo. This is the exact amount that was in his backpack this morning. Now it's gone. And your daughter was the only one near his cubby during recess. Shanice looked at Kira, who shook her head frantically. Mama, I didn't. I swear I didn't. The man spoke up, his voice dripping with condescension. Look, we understand times are tough for some families, but stealing is stealing. We're prepared to let this go if you return the money, and your daughter apologizes. Something dangerous flashed in Shanice's eyes. My daughter has nothing to apologize for, because she didn't take your money. Then you won't mind if we search her backpack, the woman challenged. Go ahead. Principal Thompson opened Kira's backpack, pulling out each item: school supplies, a worn notebook, a lunchbox, no money. The woman's eyes narrowed. Check her pockets. Excuse me, Shanice stepped forward. If she didn't take it, she won't mind proving it. Shanice looked at Kira, who nodded tearfully. The principal gently checked Kira's jacket pockets, then her jeans pockets. Nothing. The woman wasn't satisfied. She probably hid it at home. I want someone to check her house. That's enough, Shanice said, her voice hard as steel. You've accused my daughter, searched her belongings, humiliated her in front of her principal. You found nothing because there's nothing to find. We're done here. We're not done, the man said coldly. Not until we get our money back or an admission of guilt. Then we'll never be done, Shanice said, taking Kira's hand. Because my daughter didn't take your money and I won't let you bully her into saying she did. As they walked to the car, Kira sobbed against her mother's side. Mama, I didn't take it. I promise. I know baby, I know. But the damage was done. The next Monday morning, November 1st, Shanice received a call from Principal Thompson. The couple had filed a formal complaint with the school board. There would be an investigation. Kira might face suspension pending the outcome. Worse, when Shanice arrived at work that same Monday to start her training program, Rita pulled her aside before she could even enter the office. We got a problem, the foreman said, her expression grim. Someone called the main office this morning, made some accusations about you stealing from your previous employers, said you were fired for theft. Shanice's blood ran cold. That's not true. I was laid off when the company downsized. They can check my records. I believe you, Rita said. But HR is required to investigate any allegations. They're putting you on unpaid leave until they can verify your employment history. Jonathan tried to fight it, but the company's legal team won't budge. Policy is policy. Unpaid leave, the words echoed in Shanice's mind as she drove home. She had just found stable work, had just been offered a chance at something better, and now it was all crumbling around her. That night, as she held Kira while her daughter cried herself to sleep, Shanice realized exactly what was happening. That couple wasn't just upset about missing money, they were punishing her for daring to exist in their world, for not accepting their accusations without question, for standing up for herself and her child. And they had the resources to make her life hell. The investigation dragged on for 3 weeks. From early November through Thanksgiving week, 3 weeks of unpaid leave, 3 weeks of Kira being whispered about at school, 3 weeks of Shanice burning through what little savings she had left, watching the rent deadline approach like an executioner's blade. By mid-November she was 1 month behind on rent. The landlord stopped being polite. She applied for other jobs, but every potential employer called Pierce Developments for a reference, and HR was required to mention the ongoing investigation. No one wanted to take that risk. The car finally gave out completely on a Tuesday morning, November 21st. Shanice turned the key, heard a grinding sound, and then nothing. She sat there in the driver's seat, her forehead resting against the steering wheel, and for the first time in years, she let herself cry. Not because of the car, not even because of the money, but because she had done everything right. She had worked hard, kept her head down, raised her daughter to be kind and honest. And it still wasn't enough. The world still found ways to grind people like her into dust. She was wiping her eyes when someone knocked on the window. Jonathan stood outside, his expression concerned. Shanice rolled down the window. "What are you doing here?" "Rita told me what happened," he said. with the investigation, and I heard about the situation at Kira's school. I've been following it even though HR wouldn't let me intervene directly. So you came to fire me in person? Shanice asked bitterly. No, Jonathan said quietly. I came to tell you that the investigation is over as of this morning. HR verified everything. You're cleared. Shanice stared at him, not daring to believe it. What? Your former employer confirmed that you were laid off due to downsizing, not fired for theft. Gave you a glowing recommendation actually. Said you were one of the best workers they'd ever had. He paused, but there's more. I did some digging into who made that call to our office. Hired a private investigator on my own dime. He pulled out his phone, showing her a document. The call came from the same number as the parents who accused Kira, Richard and Catherine Thornton. They've been making calls all over town, trying to sabotage you, trying to get you fired, trying to get Kira expelled. My investigator traced 6 different calls to various places you'd applied for work. Shanice's hands clenched into fists. Why? What did I ever do to them? You stood up to them. Jonathan said simply, and people like that, they can't stand it when someone they consider beneath them refuses to bow, so they try to destroy them. He put his phone away. But here's the thing. I also had my investigator look into the theft at the school. Turns out their son, Brandon, has a history of losing money and blaming other kids. 3 different incidents at his previous school in Connecticut. The parents always made it go away by throwing money and threats around. They transferred him here to Portland after the last school quietly asked them to leave. Can you prove it? Already did. Gave everything to Principal Thompson yesterday afternoon. The school board met in emergency session last night. They're dropping the investigation into Kira effective immediately. The Thorntons are being asked to withdraw their child and find another school. If they refuse, the district will pursue disciplinary action against Brandon for making false accusations. Shanice felt something break open in her chest. Relief, yes, but also something darker. Rage at how close they'd come to destroying everything. Rage at a system that had been so ready to believe the worst about her daughter. Thank you, she managed, her voice thick. Jonathan nodded. You can come back to work tomorrow, November 22nd. The management training program is still yours if you want it. We'll count the 3 weeks you were on leave as completed coursework since you were studying the materials Rita gave you anyway. Shanice looked at her dead car, then back at Jonathan. I want it, but first I need to figure out how to get to work without a car. Jonathan thought for a moment. I have a company truck that's been sitting unused in our lot for the past 2 months. Consider it a work vehicle. You can use it as long as you're with the company. I can't accept that. It's not charity, it's a company vehicle for a company employee. You'll be making site visits once you finish the training program in April. You'll need reliable transportation. He pulled out a set of keys. Besides, I'm not asking. I'm telling you as your employer that you need to pick up this vehicle from our lot today and have it ready for work tomorrow morning. Shanice took the keys, her throat tight. Why are you doing all this? Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. When I was 17, my father was arrested. False accusation of embezzlement from the company where he worked as an accountant. The owner's son had been stealing for years, got caught, and blamed my dad. My father was black, the owner's son was white, and back then, that was all that mattered. It took 2 years to clear his name. By then he'd lost everything. His job, his reputation, his savings from legal fees. Jonathan's jaw tightened. It broke him. He started drinking. Died of liver disease 5 years later. He was only 43 years old. He met her eyes. I built this company on a promise that I would never let that happen to someone else if I had the power to stop it. When I saw what the Thorntons were doing to you and your daughter, I saw my father all over again. I couldn't save him, but I can help you. Shanice nodded slowly, understanding. I won't let you down. I know you won't. See you tomorrow at 7. That evening when Shanice picked up Kira from school in the company truck, her daughter's eyes went wide. Mama, is this ours? It's a work truck, Shanice explained. But yeah baby, we can use it. For the first time in weeks, Kira smiled. Really smiled. Does this mean things are getting better? Shanice pulled her daughter close. Yeah baby, I think they are. The next day Principal Thompson called her personally. Miss Williams, I owe you and Kira an apology. The school should have investigated more thoroughly before allowing the situation to escalate. We found security footage that shows Brandon Thornton entering the bathroom during the time the money allegedly went missing. He came out without the money. We believe he may have hidden it himself to frame another student. It's not the first time he's done something like this. What happens now? The Thorntons withdrew Brandon this morning. They're threatening legal action against the school, but our attorneys are confident we have grounds for a countersuit if they proceed. More importantly, Kira's record will be completely cleared. I've personally spoken to her teachers to ensure there are no lingering assumptions about her character. Thank you, Shanice said. No, Miss Williams. Thank you for not letting us railroad your daughter. You fought for her when the system failed her. That took courage. After she hung up, Shanice sat at her kitchen table and did something she hadn't done in a long time. She let herself feel hopeful. The management training program resumed on November 22nd and ran through the brutal Portland winter. Shanice threw herself into it with an intensity that surprised even Rita. She learned project management, blueprint reading, cost estimation, crew leadership. She studied at night after Kira went to bed, filling notebooks with calculations and diagrams. By January, she was caught up with where she should have been without the 3-week interruption. By February, she was ahead. Rita took her under her wing, teaching her the subtle art of managing workers who'd been doing this for 20 years and didn't particularly want to take orders from anyone new. It's not about being the toughest person on site, Rita told her one cold February morning. It's about earning respect. You do that by working harder than anyone else, by never asking someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself, and by standing up for your crew when management tries to cut corners that would put them in danger. Shanice absorbed it all. She showed up before dawn, stayed after sunset. She worked alongside the crew during the day and studied management techniques at night. She learned to read people, to understand when someone was struggling with a task and needed help versus when they just needed encouragement. But not everyone was ready to accept her. There was Danny, a crew lead who'd been with the company for 12 years. He had a habit of assigning Shanice the most physically demanding tasks, not because they needed doing, but because he was testing her, seeing if she'd break. She didn't. There was Mike Larson, who would accidentally give her the wrong measurements or outdated blueprints, then act surprised when she caught the errors. After the third time, Shanice called him out in front of the whole crew. If you've got a problem with me, say it to my face, she told him, her voice carrying across the site. But stop playing games that waste everyone's time and could get someone hurt. Mike had backed down. The crew had noticed. Then there was the incident in March with the scaffold. Shanice was doing a safety inspection on the 3rd floor when she noticed something wrong with one of the scaffold connections. The pin wasn't fully seated. It looked secure at first glance, but under load it could fail catastrophically. She called over the scaffold supervisor, a man named Frank Delgado, who'd been in construction for 30 years. This connection isn't safe, she told him, pointing to the problem. The pin needs to be reset before anyone works on this level. Frank barely glanced at it. Looks fine to me. You worrying about nothing. It's not fine. Look at the gap here. I've been building scaffold since before you were born, sweetheart. I think I know what I'm doing. Shanice felt the familiar anger rising, the same dismissive tone she'd heard 6 years ago, the same assumption that her concerns didn't matter because of who she was. But this time she had backup. Then you've been doing it wrong for 30 years. Rita's voice cut through the tension like a blade. The foreman had appeared behind them, her expression thunderous. Because Williams is right, that pin is dangerously loose. You reset it now, or you're off this site permanently. Frank's face reddened, but he reset the connection without another word. After he left, Rita turned to Shanice. Good eye. That could have killed someone. But next time, you don't ask, you tell. You're not a laborer anymore. You're training to be management, and management doesn't ask permission to keep people safe. The lesson stuck. In mid-March, she took her certification exam for the training program. 3 hours of technical questions, case studies and problem-solving scenarios. She passed with a 93% score, one of the highest in company history. On April 1st, exactly 6 months after she'd started, Jonathan called her into his office. Congratulations, you've completed the program. He slid a folder across his desk. We're breaking ground on a new project in May. Mixed-use development on the south side, residential and commercial. It's a big one, 18-month timeline, $12 million budget. He opened the folder. I want you as assistant project manager. Rita will be lead, but this will be your project to learn on. If you prove yourself here, the next one is yours to run solo. Shanice opened the folder, her heart pounding. This was it. The door Jonathan had talked about. Not just opened, but wide enough for her to walk through and build a real future. I won't let you down, she said. Jonathan smiled. I know. The project broke ground on May 15th. A 6-story building that would house retail on the ground floor and apartments above. Coordinating subcontractors, managing deliveries, keeping the project on schedule and under budget. It was like conducting an orchestra where every musician spoke a different language and half of them thought they should be the conductor instead. Shanice thrived in the chaos. She discovered she had a talent for logistics, for seeing 3 steps ahead and anticipating problems before they derailed everything. When a concrete delivery was delayed by a week in late June, she reorganized the entire schedule to keep other work moving. When a subcontractor tried to substitute inferior materials in August to save money, she caught it during an inspection and raised holy hell until it was corrected. Rita watched her with growing approval. You're a natural at this, the older woman said one afternoon in September. Best assistant I've ever had. And trust me, I've had plenty who thought they knew everything and didn't know shit. But success bred jealousy. There were men on the crew, men who'd been with the company for years, who didn't like taking direction from a woman who'd been there less than a year. Most of them came around once they saw she knew what she was doing. But a few nursed their resentment, waiting for her to fail. The first real test came during the concrete pour for the 3rd floor in early October, almost exactly 1 year after she'd started with the company. It was a critical phase. The timing had to be perfect, the mixture exact. Any mistakes, and they'd have to tear it all out and start over, costing weeks and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Shanice had been preparing for this pour for 2 weeks. She'd triple-checked the specifications, coordinated with the concrete supplier, verified the weather forecast. Everything was set for a Thursday morning pour, October 12th. Wednesday night, October 11th, she got a call. The concrete supplier, apologetic, explaining there'd been a mix-up with the order. The concrete was scheduled for Friday, not Thursday. Shanice's stomach dropped. That's not possible. I confirmed this order 3 times. The last confirmation was yesterday. I'm looking at the paperwork right now, ma'am. It says Friday, October 13th. She hung up and immediately called the supplier's office, demanding to speak to a supervisor. It took 2 hours of arguing, but eventually, they pulled the original order forms. Someone had changed the date. Recently, the original paperwork clearly showed Thursday the 12th. Do you know who made the change? Shanice asked. The supervisor hesitated. The change was requested by someone claiming to be calling from Pierce Developments. But the name they gave, Rita Martinez, doesn't match anyone in your company directory. We should have caught that, but the change came through our automated system. Sabotage. Someone was actively trying to make her fail. Shanice spent the rest of the night on the phone, calling in every favor she had, contacting every concrete supplier within 50 miles. Finally, at 2 in the morning, she found one who could do the pour Thursday morning. It would cost an extra $3,000 for the rush job, but it would get done. She showed up at the site at 5 a.m. on Thursday, running on 3 hours of sleep and pure determination. The pour went perfectly. By the time Rita arrived at 7, the crew was already smoothing the concrete into place. Rita looked at the scene, then at Shanice. I heard about the supplier issue. How'd you fix it? Found another supplier. Cost an extra $3,000, but we're still under budget for the quarter, so it won't impact the bottom line. Rita studied her. Someone's trying to sabotage you. I know, you know who. I have suspicions. What are you going to do about it? Shanice looked out over the site. My job. If they want to play games, let them. I'll be too busy succeeding to care. But the sabotage didn't stop. Over the next 6 weeks, materials got delivered to the wrong address, inspections got scheduled for the wrong dates. Small things that could be explained away as innocent mistakes, but happened just often enough to create problems. Shanice documented everything. Every irregularity, every mistake, every coincidence. She built a file, methodical and thorough, but she didn't go to Jonathan. Not yet. She needed to be absolutely certain, needed to have proof that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. The proof came in late November during the electrical rough-in phase. Shanice was doing a final walkthrough before the inspection when she noticed something wrong with the wiring in one of the units. The neutral and hot wires were reversed. It wouldn't have been caught until someone tried to use an outlet and got shocked, or worse, started a fire. She called the electrical subcontractor immediately, who did the wiring in Unit 304. The foreman checked his records. That would be Jake Martinez. But that doesn't make sense. Jake's been doing this for 15 years. He doesn't make mistakes like that. Shanice felt a chill run down her spine. Pull up the building's security footage for yesterday between 2 and 6 p.m. It took an hour to get the footage. When she finally saw it, her suspicions were confirmed. A man she recognized from the crew, Derek Walsh, one of the ones who'd been hostile since day one, entering the unit after Jake had finished, clearly tampering with the junction box. She took the footage to Jonathan that same day. He watched it twice, his expression growing darker each time. How long has this been going on? Shanice handed him her file. Since early October, 7 weeks. This is the first time I could prove it wasn't just bad luck. Jonathan read through the file, his jaw clenched. When he finished, he looked up at her. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because I needed to be sure, and because I needed to prove I could handle it. He nodded slowly. Derek Walsh has been with this company for 8 years. He's a decent worker when he wants to be, but he's also filed 3 complaints with HR about female supervisors over the years. We settled 2 of them quietly. He closed the file. That ends now. By the end of the day, Derek Walsh was fired. Not just fired, but blacklisted from every major construction company in the city. Jonathan made sure of it. The message was clear: you don't mess with Jonathan's people. The South Side project finished in early December of 2026, 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and $30,000 under budget. The 18-month timeline had been compressed to just under 17 months. The client was ecstatic. Pierce Developments got written up in the local business journal as one of the most reliable contractors in the region, and Shanice Williams got her own project. It was smaller than the Southside development, a renovation of an old warehouse into modern office space, but it was hers. Her name on the paperwork, her decisions, her responsibility. The timeline was 8 months with a $4 million budget. Kira, now 11 years old, stood beside her mother at the groundbreaking ceremony in January 2027, holding her hand tightly. "You're really in charge, Mama?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "I really am, baby. That's so cool." Shani squeezed her daughter's hand. They'd moved into a new apartment 8 months ago, in May of 2026. Nothing fancy, but it was clean, safe, in a good neighborhood. Kira had her own bedroom for the first time in her life. The fridge was always full. The electricity never got shut off. They weren't rich, probably never would be, but they were stable, secure. And that was something Shanice had never thought she'd be able to say. The warehouse renovation took exactly 8 months, finishing in September 2027, right on schedule, and $5,000 under budget. 8 months of 12-hour days, of solving problems, of learning what it meant to be the person everyone looked to for answers. Shanice made mistakes, plenty of them, but she learned from each one, adjusted, improved. When the project finished, Jonathan offered her a position as a full project manager. Salary of $75,000 a year, benefits, company vehicle, the whole package. "You've earned this 10 times over," he told her. "The question is, are you ready for it?" Shanice thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, sitting on that worn-out couch, head in her hands, wondering how she'd make rent, wondering if she'd ever be anything more than someone who scraped by doing whatever work she could find. That woman had been so tired, so scared, so certain that no matter how hard she worked, she'd never get ahead. But that woman had also been strong enough to help a lost little boy when she had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Strong enough to take a chance when opportunity knocked. Strong enough to keep fighting when people tried to tear her down. "Yeah," Shani said, meeting Jonathan's eyes. "I'm ready." By December 2027, 3 years and 2 months after she'd found Christopher crying outside that grocery store, Shanice had saved enough for a down payment on a house. It was small, modest, but it had 3 bedrooms, a backyard, and room for a swing set. The closing happened on December 20th. She and Kira moved in on the day after Christmas. On New Year's Day 2028, Shani stood at the window of her new house, watching Kira play in the backyard with their dog, a big golden retriever named Max, that they'd adopted from the shelter 2 weeks earlier. The house looked almost exactly like the one Kira had drawn in that art project 3 years ago. Not because Shanice had been trying to recreate it, but because sometimes when you worked hard enough and caught the right break, dreams had a way of becoming reality. Her phone rang. "Jonathan, got a big one," he said, without preamble. $20 million mixed-use development, 8-story building, commercial and residential. The client specifically requested you as project manager after hearing about your work on the warehouse project. Said they won't accept anyone else. Shani smiled. "Send me the details. I'll look it over tonight." "You've come a long way, Williams. 3 years ago you'd never managed anything. Now clients are requesting you by name." "We both have." After she hung up, Kira ran inside, cheeks flushed from playing with Max. "Mama, can we make hot chocolate?" "Sure, baby." As they stood in the kitchen together, Kira mixing the chocolate, while Shanice heated the milk, her daughter looked up at her. "Mama, yeah, remember when we lived in that old apartment, and you used to look so sad all the time?" "When I was little," Shanice's chest tightened. "I remember. Are you happy now?" Shanice looked around their kitchen, at the fridge covered in Kira's artwork and school papers, at Max asleep in the corner, his tail thumping softly against the floor, at her daughter's bright, curious face, at the life they'd built together, piece by careful piece. "Yeah, baby," she said softly, "I really am." That night, after Kira had gone to bed, Shani sat on her back porch, looking up at the stars. She thought about that October morning, 3 years and 2 months ago, when she'd almost walked past a crying little boy, because she'd been so wrapped up in her own problems. She thought about what might have happened if she had walked past, if she'd told herself it wasn't her problem, if she'd chosen the easier path. She would never know, and she was grateful for that, because the path she'd chosen, the harder one, the scarier one, had led her here, to a place where she could look at her daughter without feeling like she was failing her, to a career she was proud of, to a future that looked like something worth building. Life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still challenges, still moments when doubt crept in. But those moments were different now. They weren't about survival, they were about growth. And growth, Shanice had learned, was something you earned. Not through luck or shortcuts, but through showing up every day and doing the work, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. She pulled out her phone and opened her photos, scrolling to a picture from last week. She and Rita at a job site, both of them covered in dust, grinning at the camera. Behind them the warehouse they'd brought from blueprint to reality. Another photo, Kira at her school's art show in November, standing proudly next to a drawing of their new house. First place ribbon pinned to the frame. Another Jonathan at the last company meeting in December, announcing that Pierce Developments had been named one of the fastest growing construction companies in the state. Shanice had been in that photo too, standing with the other project managers, all of them building something bigger than themselves. She'd kept the old business card Jonathan had given her that October afternoon 3 years ago in the parking lot. It was in a frame now, hanging in her home office, a reminder of where she'd started, of what was possible when you were brave enough to take a chance. Her phone buzzed, a text from Rita. "Early start Monday, 6 a.m. Big week ahead. Don't be late, boss." Shani smiled and typed back, "I'm never late." She sat there a while longer, listening to the sounds of the night. A dog barking somewhere in the distance, the rustle of wind through the trees, the quiet hum of a life lived with purpose. Eventually she went inside, locked the door behind her, and checked on Kira one last time. Her daughter slept peacefully, one arm wrapped around her stuffed dog, her face relaxed and content. Max was curled up at the foot of her bed, keeping watch. Shanice kissed her forehead gently. "Sweet dreams, baby." In the morning there would be work, challenges, problems to solve, a project to manage, a future to build. But tonight there was this: a warm house, a sleeping child, a loyal dog, and the deep satisfaction of knowing that she had taken every obstacle life had thrown at her, and turned it into something beautiful. Not because someone had saved her,
Not because she'd gotten lucky, but because when a door had opened, she'd been brave enough to walk through it, and once she was through, she'd had the strength to keep going. 3 years and 2 months, from barely making rent to owning her own home, from cleaning offices at midnight to managing multi-million-dollar construction projects, from wondering if she'd ever be able to give Kira the life she deserved to watching her daughter play in their own backyard with a dog named Max. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been quick, but it had been worth it. Every single day of struggle had been worth it.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.